Hello there, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, all about creating a data culture, or how data mastery can transform your insurance business. My name is Chris Kurzweil, and I am one of the sales engineers here at Redgate, based in Cambridge. I'm going to be co-hosting today's session along with James Boother. James?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Chris, for having me along today. My name's James Boother, and I work for Coeo. We're a data platform specialist partner, and we're doing a lot of work around helping organisations with data mastery. So I'm excited to be here alongside you today, Chris, to discuss it.
Cool, thanks. Glad to hear it. Before we get going, I just wanted to cover a couple of basic housekeeping items. So everyone will be on mute throughout the webinar, but please do post your questions into the GoToWebinar panel, and we'll try to cover as many of them as possible either during, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Great to get that in as we present.
Or at the end of the session. The session will also be recorded, so we will be able to share that recording with you in a few days. So if you do miss anything, don't worry. Before we begin, I just wanted a couple of words about Redgate. For those of you who don't know, we've been around for, actually it's more like 19 years now. We had our birthday not that long ago.
I hope you had a good party.
Definitely did. Don't worry about that. We have around about 200,000 customers, and really our mission statement is to improve the quality and efficiency of SQL Server database development and deployment processes for those customers. A lot of people know us from things like the SQL Server Central and SimpleTalk hubs, so those big community presence, and really that's a great place to go to for sharing best practice, learnings, and helping to solve problems with the database community. We also like to say that we practice what we preach. So the product releases last year is over 1,000. We really seek to adopt those agile processes and take that on board and create products that are in line with our customers' goals.
And I think it's fair to say from all of your customers that I work with, Chris, everyone really values that, and they get a lot of value out of adding your products into their workflows.
Well, you said that, not me. Okay, so that's enough about Redgate.
On to Coeo. So we have 4 key values at Coeo. Everyone that works within the organisation has a thirst for knowledge as number 1. We love learning about new things, and we spend a lot of time at user group events and within the community, getting lots of information out of SimpleTalk and the great online content that's available. We also like to say it as it is, so that's why we present a lot of webinars and that kind of thing about actually sharing our opinions and views on the industry and the market. We have a desire to help, and again, that's why we get awfully involved in the community at user group events and conferences and that kind of thing. And we love a good party as well, and hence why we want to make it fun to work at Coeo. So we really value, we're a small organisation, and we really feel we're greater than the sum of the parts that make up the team. We believe that we provide really good value to our customers, and that's borne out through feedback that we get from our customers, and our Net Promoter Score is at an all-time high of 87, which is a fantastic achievement from everyone within the team. Our thirst for knowledge goes on to all of the awards and accolades that we've received over the years. We're also very proud of the fact that we're a Global Partner of the Year for Microsoft in 2017 for cloud productivity. Our business is split down into a few key features. The first being our dedicated support. So we're helping organisations manage and ensure the performance and availability of their data platform 24 hours a day from a team of very dedicated support technicians in our offices in Reading. We also back that up with data platform consultancy, business intelligence consultancy, and platform and application modernisation, which is really important to a lot of our customers right now, especially as we're beginning to see the end of service of SQL Server 2008 coming up next year, and organisations need to move quickly now to make sure that they stay supported.
That sounds kind of familiar. I believe we may have covered that in a previous webinar.
It's only a few weeks ago, I believe, Chris.
That long ago.
Yeah. It's available for download as well. So if anyone's very interested in that, we've got an hour of discussion on the Redgate website for people that are interested.
Cool.
So the whole topic of today is really about data mastery and what that means and what changes that can drive. And I think you've got a few words, Chris, to start us off on the right foot around this.
Yeah, so this, I guess, would be the original data scientist.
I agree, yes.
Fantastic example of someone who identified a problem and wanted to get to the root of that problem. The problem was that cholera, great problem towards the start
of the 1800s.
Victorian era, and so it's a horrific illness. You want to curb it as much as possible. Ultimately, can lead to death. And there was an outbreak in London. Cholera at the time, I believe, was thought of as an air-based, what do they call it? A air-based transition, an air-based
contagion.
Contagion, that's the word. So the leading theory was that it was spread through sneezes and coughs and breathing on other people. There was one particular chap, Dr. John Snow, and he didn't buy this theory. So what he did was, quite simply, take a map of the infected area and mark on it the locations of those who have been infected.
So I think it's fair to say that's probably one of the very first data visualizations.
Absolutely, yeah. And then by having a look at the outbreaks, where they were, and then visualizing them, he started to spot a trend. And that trend was that they seemed to be centralized in this location at the bottom. So there's this hotspot, I guess, like an early heat map of locations. And so based on that, we can start to think about why that area is so critical. Specifically, he noticed that there were water pumps based in that area, and there was one water pump in particular, a Broad Street pump, that was central to that hotspot location. And while there may have been some outliers, so you can see there's a few dots that don't quite lie in the hotspot, a lot of those were attributed to the fact that there was a school, a community centre right on that water pump. So there were so many individuals that were not only in the area consuming the water pump's water, but also coming from outside of the area to get to the school. And so through that presentation of the data, he effectively proved that cholera is a water-based disease, and in actual fact, the real root cause of this was the dumping of waste right near the intake for the water pump. So a great example, I think, of an early case of someone using the data to get an effective outcome.
Yeah, agreed. And what I really like about this, Chris, is that it really demonstrates that if you take data as the heart of what you do and really learn to master the use of the data, then work out how to visualize that data, you can really change hearts and minds. And as you mentioned at the beginning, everyone believed that this was airborne. There were plenty of naysayers when Dr. John Snow identified that Broad Street pump, but he kept working the data and kept representing the facts and created a very data-driven outcome from this. And that's really why we wanted to start with this conversation, because it demonstrates the power of using data mastery to support your business case.
Yeah, and ultimately save lives, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so maybe onto the topic in hand, focusing on how insurance companies in particular can better leverage their data estate, right?
Yeah, great. So we commissioned a white paper earlier this year, which we entitled Reversing the Race to the Bottom. This was all based on research that we conducted with our customers and our network of IT professionals who work within the finance industry. We spoke to a large range of insurers, brokers and underwriters to really gauge exactly what is going on in the market, what the trends are, and what the challenges and pains and concerns are of those that are at the cutting edge of what's going on. And what we were trying to do was distill that down into sort of 7 key topics that could be taken away and actually actioned by individuals, so that they could really learn about what the best practices that we've seen in the industry are, and how taking data mastery to heart could potentially help them differentiate their organisation from the rest of the market. The white paper that we created, that is the topic of today's discussion, is available for download from our website. So if you go to the landing page for the finance industry, from there's a video about this, and there's also a link to the download page.
Cool. Yeah, it's definitely worth a read. I had a look at it myself, and there's a huge amount of information on there. And even for someone who's not hugely aware of the insurance market and how that operates, extremely interesting. No, I loved it.
Brilliant, that's fantastic feedback, and hopefully there's some practical things in there for the IT professional, as there are some industry trends in there as well, which it sounds like you picked up on as well.
So we're going to go through those 7 key topics then, and not only look at the high level 7 points themselves and how they affect that industry and those businesses, but also how we can look to actually tactically implement some of those points.
Yeah, absolutely. So very much the beginning of this session is going to be looking about what the business trends are and how having data mastery applies to that, and then we'll come on to some technical implementation building blocks that you can put together to work towards it.
All right, well, let's start at the logical place. Number 1, value-based services. I guess that you're looking at the outcome versus the price, and the insurance market has been around for quite a while now, a few years, been around the block. As a result, it's quite a mature market, and especially these days, a very competitive market. So you've got a lot of companies that are coming up, comparing the market and doing such similar things. So any way you can differentiate, the better you'll be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you rightly say, this is a very traditional and well-developed market. But as all industries are experiencing right now, there's rapid transformation going on with price comparison websites, as you rightly point out. And that has created, certainly in retail insurance, a real price sensitivity around the products and services that are available from the industry. So it's really important to understand exactly where you sit in that value chain. Are you trying to differentiate yourself on customer service, or are you trying to differentiate yourself on price of premium? And depending on the direction that you're going will impact exactly how you use data to support what you're trying to achieve. If you are trying to serve the market at the lowest possible price through these price comparison sites, you want to be returning a result back to a price comparison site as quickly as possible to get your policy at the top of the list. So there, you need to be very, very quickly returning a result set of very accurately priced premium, because if the price is too high, the customer's not going to buy, and if you underprice it, then you're going to potentially not make enough money on that piece of insurance that you've sold. So calculating an accurate price and delivering that very quickly is key to those types of organisation. If you're trying to differentiate your product around the service that you offer, and maybe trying to retain a premium price point for the product or service that you're selling, then what you're really looking at is trying to reduce the cost to service those customers. So you might want to still give the impression to the customer and client that they are receiving a very personalised and white-gloved experience from you. But in order to do that, you could look at using automation to actually reduce the back-end cost of delivering that very personalised service. So if your contact centre is being more efficient with the use of their time, you're able to reduce the time to serve that customer and therefore reduce the cost, but still give that very personalised experience. And again, data mastery really comes into that, because you may well want to have a whole load of recommendations engines sitting behind that to help with that decision process, to speed that up and make that more effective. We've been doing quite a lot of work with organisations that create telematic services and create some very advanced premium calculation services. And again, this is all about data. This is where a lot of insurance companies are going, and making sure that you've built this on really good quality principles ensures that you can win in this part of the market.
Cool, that makes a lot of sense. On to point number 2, where we're looking at how you can maximize your data assets. I guess that insurance companies really have a huge amount of data, right? So there's a lot to leverage.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I found fascinating when I started working in reinsurance was how much one data point was used by all insurers, and that was postcode.
Okay.
So, you know, every policy and premium that the insurance company knows the insured postcode. But that might not be relevant if you're doing motor or personal insurance, because as soon as that car has left the address that it's parked at, or the person walked out of their home address, then that information is not relevant. But these organisations actually store a lot more information than that. And what is really interesting, if you're starting to really model your exposure and risk, is that there's a lot of data in the underwriting software, in the claim systems, and in the brokerage systems that most of these organisations are running. But what we have spotted over the last couple of years, and what a lot of the CIOs told us when we interviewed them, was that data is siloed into these different systems. And by taking that data and introducing a data warehouse over the top of that, it's possible to bring lots of disparate data sets together and then make much more informed decisions that can support your business. The start of that is bringing the data together, but once you've got it there, it's a real change of culture that needs to be employed, because if people don't change their behaviour, then having a data set that's all encompassing isn't actually going to make any business difference.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
One CIO called us in to work with them on the basis that the people weren't really using those source systems effectively. As you stated at the beginning of the webinar, it's a pretty traditional business, and all the brokers would come in at 9 AM in the morning, do their morning's work, do a lot of brokering over lunch with other brokers, and then they would leave the office at 5 PM. And the CIO said to us, knowledge leaves the business in the heads of the individuals, but because we're not reporting on the data, there's no impetus to actually get that data into our platforms. So by building an effective reporting solution over the top of those core systems, we gave visibility of who was completing the data entry and who wasn't. And then that gave them much more visibility into and was able to point the spotlight on those that weren't really using the systems effectively. And then they were able to ensure that critical knowledge wasn't leaving the business at 5 PM every night.
I guess that kind of leads us onto the next point quite nicely. If we've got this great foundation, and more than just the one data point, we've got postcode and maybe your age as well, 2 data points. How about we just start collecting everything then? If I can find out your inside leg measurement as well as the color of your eyes, your age, your postcode, the more the better, right?
Yeah, so there's always this, there's never too much of a good thing. But actually, if it's not relevant to what you're trying to achieve, then it's costing you to store that data, and potentially that could be creating a risk against legislation such as GDPR, because you could be holding a lot of information that's not relevant to the processing you're doing within your organisation. So it is essential that you consider what items of data that you need to measure to make sure that you're only capturing the data that you need and not everything about the individual.
So this isn't just a compliance question, then it's also just keeping you on track, making sure you're more focused.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about good business practice, essentially, because what you want to do is make sure that the data you're holding has value to you. So the cost to capture that data, the cost to manage that data, and the cost to analyze that data is considered when you decide what data it is that you want to capture. As you say, there's not much value in capturing your inside leg measurement. However, there's probably a lot of value in tracking your claims history, or people of a similar disposition to you, their claims history, and using that aggregated and anonymized in order to better calculate the underwriting. You might also start looking at augmented data sets. And we've had conversations with organisations where they might want to start looking at weather data, because if you're insuring property or marine, there could be really big exposures against prevailing weather patterns. We've seen in the news very recently about the massive fires in California. That could well be environmental change that's creating that, although that's very much denied by the US administration.
So are we saying that maybe those in the southwest are going to have more rainfall, so you need to worry about cars rusting more, that kind of thing?
Or potentially, if we know that we're seeing much heavier downfall of rain in shorter periods of time, what's the flood risk? And does that extend beyond the geographic area that we've been looking at historically? And could we predict where that's going to be in the future? So we can essentially create much more accurate premiums against that.
I guess one thing that might drive that process, whether it's be focused on something specific or get more of a holistic view on that, is adoption of new technology. And this isn't always that straightforward. I think in IT, we can be very buzzword addicted, I guess. You get a new bit of technology comes around, suddenly we're trying to shoehorn in every little piece and part that we can. But we can intelligently look at that. So taking, I guess, the technology that is relevant to our bit of the business and, using it where it's sensible.
Yeah, absolutely. And technology could be the catalyst that evolves the business. But also the businesses of insurance is evolving as well, and technology needs to support that evolution. We're seeing that the Lloyd's market is going digital. That's going to create opportunity, and that's also going to create risk for insurers that are used to the traditional ways of working. We're seeing new technologies coming into the market, so maybe considering blockchain across multiple insurers and being able to have all of that data distributed with transactions going on that everyone knows are safe and well understood. We're also seeing that movements that we're seeing in other industries are also affecting insurance. Disintermediation is being widely seen within retail as a risk, where big web organisations, where e-retailers have completely changed the way distribution and supply chain work. And that's put the high street under significant pressure. We're beginning to see the same thing in insurance, for retail insurance. It's unusual for an individual to have the same broker for all the insurance they place these days, whereas only 5 or 10 years ago, lots of individuals went to their broker on the high street and placed their car insurance, their home insurance, their life insurance, all through that one individual. Whereas we're now going online and using price comparison sites. So we're seeing the technology really change the landscape, and it's a really good question as to whether it's technology leading the business or business leading the technology. And we need to look at it from both lenses to make sure we're really providing our organisation with the best competitive advantage that's possible.
We've actually got a question that's come in from the audience, and that is around big data. And so big data, big buzzword again. A few years ago it was very big. I guess it died away a little bit now, but the question is what companies or what company use cases around big data can you think of? What are companies doing with big data?
That's a great question. And earlier in the week, I was fortunate enough to meet up with some data professionals that are leading their insurance companies, and it was a conversation we had there as well. And what we were agreeing around the table is that actually a lot of the key business decisions come down to good data engineering practice against the data sets that are owned within the organisation. And that's not necessarily a big data problem. That's very much about engineering the data sets that are already siloed within the organisation. But we looked at on the previous slide about how weather data might help an organisation predicting risk. And so we might be augmenting big data sets from other sources in with our current internally held data sets. One of the big cases I see for big data is around IoT. So if we're seeing devices being used within motor insurance, we're seeing that companies that put black boxes in cars are able to provide cost-effective insurance to young motorists, whereas traditionally they were very much priced out of the market.
Yeah.
And that's created a real opportunity to reduce the price for the customer, but actually calculate the risk more effectively for the insurer. So in that case, both sides of the coin win. And that's a really good case of where big data comes in, because that IoT data that's coming off the devices is potentially going to be changing at a very high frequency and be a very large volume of data. So understanding exactly how you need to engineer the process and then maintain and manage those data sets so that you can effectively use them is really important.
So once again, leveraging that data you already have.
Correct.
And harking on to what we were saying about in the previous slide as well. And I suppose it's not all a case of trying to provide a better value offering or making more sense of the information you already have, but also just a simple commercial question as well. How can we better commercialize our offerings? How can we, like the slide says, cross-sell and upsell into those clients we already have?
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, we're all in business.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is ensure that we're getting the maximum value for and out of every customer that we interact with. It's much more cost effective to sell an additional service to a existing customer than it is to always be looking for new customers. So if you can effectively make recommendations to your existing customer base, then you're going to be able to sell to them at a lower cost for sale. So if you can leverage the data that you've got across your business and then use that to create very targeted messaging to your existing customer base, that gives you a great opportunity for upsell and cross-sell, rather than just going to market trying to attract new customers the whole time. The other thing that it achieves is it prevents this concept where everyone becomes agnostic to your marketing message.
Especially with the again, compare the market, that kind of thing. Every time the renewal comes up, I know that I'm certainly one of those people who will instantly just look for a better quote because I know I'll be able to save myself £100 or so.
Yeah, exactly. And you know exactly when the renewal is going to be if you've offered that current piece of insurance.
Yeah.
So if you can offer a good price at renewal ahead of someone else in the market coming in and making an offer, then you're more likely to win that renewal than not. If you got that renewal invitation, Chris, before you went to compare the market and you felt that that was a fair price, you might just not bother with going off and doing that.
I'll happily switch if it's £100, but if it's £20, then why bother?
Exactly, because you're going to have to go through a lot of work in order to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so is it worth the £20? Is your time worth the £20? So if we're doing fair pricing and we're getting that message out effectively to our customer, then we're going to increase our renewal rates. The other thing that we can do is identify when other forms of insurance are going to come up. It's quite common these days for the insurer to ask you if you're buying motor insurance when your home insurance renewal is coming up. And if you're capturing that information, then you can send marketing information out just ahead of a competitor's renewal and make sure that you're in with a chance of winning that business from a customer that's already delighted with your service. And so that can create a lot more value for you as an organisation.
Okay, so there's a lot of data out there that we all want to get the most access out of, the best value out of as much as we possibly can. But there is one, I guess, blocker to a lot of people is that we aren't all data scientists. We have to find a way to get a handle on that data. Like you and I might be quite comfortable reading the output of a select statement, but that doesn't apply to everyone. Fortunately, there are a lot of things these days to help people out. So I believe Power BI is quite a big thing these days. It's kind of taken off in the last few years. Kind of like the case of the doctor we had at the start. How can we take the data we have, present it in a different way, and get more value out of it?
Yeah, it's interesting to consider everyone within the organisation as an information worker. And it's really easy to think that everyone in insurance loves spreadsheets because insurance has a reputation of being very mathematical. Rightly so. We've got some very, very experienced mathematical actuaries and brokers who love data sets and working with raw data. However, everyone in the customer journey is actually an information worker. And if we can present that data visually rather than in a tabular model, such as in a spreadsheet or out of a select statement, then we're going to make that data accessible to everyone in our business. And it's when we've got that and we've built that culture around data and in a visual format that we can really start to differentiate from our competitors. So let's make sure that we're thinking about everyone and we're visualizing that data as well as presenting the raw data to the individuals. And if we can get that into the hands of the people working for our organisation, where they want to work, when they want to work, they can make much more informed decisions. And things like using Power BI gives them access to that in a visual form, but also rolling out things like the mobile app for Power BI. A lot of people that work insurance actually work in the field. They might be working with individuals of high net worth in their homes or in their offices. And so they're not on the corporate network the whole time. And it's important to get that information out to them in a presentable way so that they can be informed when they're making decisions and helping supporting their customer.
Good stuff. Okay, so the last point, last but definitely not least, modeling the future. Isn't that essentially the idea of insurance as a whole, to predict the future? How can we improve that?
Absolutely. So once we've put all the data engineering into place, then we'll have some great data sets to work on. And once we've got those, we can then start putting some models around that. And rather than using models that are deterministic, we can then start putting machine learning over the top. And we've worked with insurance companies and we've interviewed lots of CIOs and CTOs that are either doing this today or are aspiring to do this in the future. And there's a big opportunity for insurers around using AI to help them with this modelling. We can think of enhancing renewal premium calculations. We need to make a profit. We're a business at the end of the day. But if we get that premium calculation wrong, then the customer may go elsewhere. So if we can use predictive analytics to price that as effectively as possible, we'll get the margin that we need for the business that we place, but we'll also give a fair price. And by doing that accurately with a model, we can do that very quickly and effectively for every premium that we write. We might be looking at claims. So one of the areas that we need to consider is all of the payouts that we're making on the insurance. Now, 99% of the time, they're all fair, and that's the correct thing that we should be doing, and the right thing we should be doing as the insurer. But we only want to pay out on the fair claims. If we took all of our claims data together, we could potentially start identifying where there may be fraudulent claims. We've seen a lot in the press and in the trade press and the news, especially around mobile insurance, mobile phones and tablets and that kind of thing. And it's not uncommon for those areas where there's a high value device that's being insured for there to be fraudulent activity in those claims. If we can predict though that when the claim is coming in, we could take that through a different workflow and put enhanced verification on that to ensure that we are only paying out on fair claims. We might want to improve our budgeting and forecasting. That will give us a much more predictable business so that we know where we're going to stand in a year, 2, 3 years' time. And then we can plan our business around that and create some predictable growth that the stakeholders will be looking for. So bringing all this together gives us an opportunity to be more effective in the way that we operate and potentially create new models that will help us create business models that we don't see today. And that's how we can differentiate from others in the market.
Okay, thanks for that. That's I think a great overview of the white paper. So the 7 kind of key points to drive the business in this ever-changing data landscape. But personally, as a technically oriented person myself, my question is always how do we do this? So that's my question for you. How do we do this? How do we take those 7 goals and translate that into reality?
I'm glad you asked, Chris, because many of us are geeks at heart. So let's get down to some sort of different building blocks that we can use in order to start gaining data mastery across the organisation. So the first thing that I really want to look at is we've got our big bucket of data on the left-hand side, and we want to get to action, which is what we're seeing on the right-hand side. So if we look at an evolution of that, we might start with creating static reports. They might be in SQL Server reporting services, Cognos, one of the other more traditional reporting platforms. Now the trouble with that is that what tends to happen is that report is generated and the first thing the user does is click Save to CSV. They extract that data out and then they go through quite a significant manual process, usually in Excel, of pivot tables and all the rest of it in order to get to a point where they can make a decision.
So they're normalizing into a way that suits them.
Yeah, exactly. And they're trying to get some personal insight out of a very generic report.
Yeah.
Those traditional reports had a high cost to create, so the IT department tried to create as few that served as many functions as possible, understandably. But that meant that it's not a very personalised experience, and it takes a lot of time and skill to get from the output of that report to the action that needs to be taken. If we ramp that up a notch, we then start looking at interactive dashboards. This is really where technology like Tableau and Power BI and Click come in, where they're much more interactive, and we're creating dashboards. We're separating the concern between the acquisition of the data and the data engineering to put that data set together, and then the presentation of that data and that personal insight the user wants to create.
So instead of people normalizing data for an application that suits them, having the ability to normalize the data in a more native application from the original report.
Yeah, correct. So you might have some pre-canned reports in your Power BI solution and some dashboards that are shared through the organization. And as an individual, you might still do a little bit of work to maybe change the graphing type, or bring two different data sets together on the same report, so you can start getting your own personal insight into the information that is presented in the data sets that have already been assembled for you. But that still requires some work in order to do that before you can get to the decision of action. We can then start looking at where we can put a few predictions into that. Maybe the dashboards could have a trend line on them or something like that, that help us make our decisions a little bit faster. But again, we might have some manual interaction going on there. Where we ultimately might like to get to is decision automation. And we're essentially cutting out all of those intermediary steps. We may well have a model over the top of those data sets that's analysing the data as it comes through, and then creating an automatic maybe recommendation for a cross-sell or upsell opportunity that's either being presented straight back to the customer or onto the screen of the call centre staff. So they don't have to go through those early steps to think, what's the next best product to sell Chris after I've sold him his motor insurance? And that will speed up the amount of time it takes them to serve that customer, but also that decision is made in real time on behalf of that member of staff, so they can make a much more effective recommendation to the end customer.
So not only reducing the amount of time that member of staff has to spend, so reducing the overheads for the business, but then also offering or delivering value quickly. So
yeah, creating an opportunity.
Attacking the margin from both ends.
Correct, yeah, absolutely. So this is probably the why in this part of the discussion. Let's move on to the how. So this is a sort of architectural diagram.
This is a diagram I can really get into.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got all of our data sets on the left-hand side. Let's start right in the bottom left-hand side of the diagram. And our organisation has loads of structured data. As we said, we've got CRM data, we've got brokerage data, we've got claims data, probably a myriad of other data sets within our organisation. We can break down those silos by connecting back up to those existing data sets and landing those all into a new data platform. On the top left-hand side, we might have a whole load of other third-party and potentially some SaaS data and that kind of thing. We might be collecting the Net Promoter Score for how well we're performing as an organisation, the recommendations that our customers say about us. We might be bringing in some data from social media to see the sentiment of what people are saying about us in the public arena. We might be bringing in the IoT data off the devices that we've landed into vehicles, or perhaps if we're offering maintenance insurance, rather like sort of home care and that kind of thing, we might start putting devices into the boilers in the house so that we can do predictive maintenance against that. So we're bringing in all of that IoT data, and we can land that in real time in the IoT hub in Azure. So if we break this, once we get from those data sets and we start looking at the data flows as we go through this data platform architecture, you can see there's a dotted line through the middle. And on the brace on the right-hand side, we've got a red brace at the top and a blue brace at the bottom. That bottom brace is all around the batch layer. So this is sort of our more traditional warehouse processing that a lot of organisations are already creating a lot of capability in and may well have had for many years now. And that's our structured data warehouse, perhaps sitting in Azure SQL DW. We will run a regular load into that so that we are maybe collecting up everything up to last night's data or an hourly data set. And we can make informed decisions against historic data by presenting that in a Power BI dashboard. In the red brace on the top side, we've got a speed layer. And this is about using real-time data to make real-time informed decisions. We might be loading that through Databricks, through Cosmos DB, and then hooking into the real-time APIs that allow our applications to make real-time informed decisions. So the example we talked about in the contact center, we might be pulling through the information that the contact center representative is entering against the new policy or the claim that's coming in, and analysing that against the big data set that we've got, or the structured data set that we've got, to allow us to run an AI model and make a real-time decision on the top of that. And bringing those two different layers together allow us to look historically at the data and make operational decisions, and in real time make informed decisions straight away.
Great, thanks. Yeah, a lot of information to take in on that one.
Yeah, so we've been discussing this a lot with customers recently, and this is a great topic of discussion. A lot of customers are recognising that they have got a good understanding of that batch layer. A lot of people have been building data warehouses in SQL Server, maybe in an APS on premises, or in SQL DW in Azure. But looking at the real-time data and bringing those two together to create an overall data and AI platform is a great direction to be looking in from a technical perspective. So we've looked at creating the data engineering behind it.
Yeah.
What I now want to start thinking about is how we can get that adopted, because it's all very well having a fantastic data platform.
Just bring in Cosmos DB and some kind of AI system and put it all on Azure and then forget to serve it to anyone.
Yeah, exactly. Or we do provide it, but people have to go out of their way to use it. And let's face it, everyone's got a lot to do in their day-to-day life. And if we can't make it accessible to them, they're never going to adopt it and use it, in which case all that innovation, all that time, all that expense ultimately just goes to waste. So we've been doing a lot of work with customers to look at how we can make sure BI is actually adopted by the end users. And we found that there are really three waves of adoption. If we get a first wave of early adopters on board, then they can become the technology champions. And we don't have to look far to find them, do we, Chris?
No, certainly not.
We're really looking at the people like you and me that love this stuff and want to try getting benefit out of it. And if we can do that, often within the IT department, but it may well be someone that's very technical within the business. If we think of insurance, actuaries love data. They're very, very accomplished mathematicians. And if we can show them the benefit of using a technology like Power BI, they can really start being our first wave of users to be our technical champions within the organisation.
So the two in the bottom right could almost be me and you. You just need one of them to have a beard.
Yeah, I think the guy on the left with the spanner is definitely you, Chris. I don't like wearing a tie, but I'm happy to wear this one for the team.
All right, take it for the team.
And then when we look at the second layer, what we're really looking at is our first wave of business users. And we want champions within the organisation. They're probably pretty technical within their sphere, but because we've got a first wave already adopted with very deeply technical people, when they get down to a level of technical competency that they're nervous about, they've got someone to back that question off to. So by building it up in a layered approach like this, we can make sure that there's support for those champions that are out within the team.
So actually, I'll let you carry on. We've got a question that's coming, but I think if I let you finish the story,
and then we want to get everyone using it. And so if we can get our end users working with our champions that are spread around the organisation, then that's going to give us the 3 layers of adoption that we need to ensure that this is picked up and used by the organisation.
So the question that's come in that I think is pretty pertinent to this is, can you recommend a good starting point for Power BI? So I guess if you've got a user who's never used Power BI before, whereabouts should they go to start? What is a good learning resource?
So Microsoft have got some great learning resources on Power BI. There's Channel 9 videos, and they've got some amazing getting started videos there. We obviously have an introduction to Power BI course that people can come on, and that's a 2-day classroom-based course that get people started. If you're looking at trying to get someone else involved, what works really well is to find something that they're passionate about. Mm-hmm. So maybe you've got a broker or an actuary that's interested in a particular data set, and they've traditionally been using Excel to do that. And then they will probably run some pivot tables over the top of it. A great way to start with that user would be to sit down alongside them, take the raw data from the Excel spreadsheet or the CSV file, and load that into Power BI Desktop sitting next to them, and then show them how easy it is to create the visualizations over the top. And then they'll start seeing and making their own insights into the data and understanding how they want that data presented back to them. Once you've done that, you can then start looking at the data engineering behind it, because you'll get the adoption and the buy-in from the stakeholders that ultimately will be paying for this solution, and then demand will build within the organisation, and you'll get a great deal of support and traction within the business community.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you so much, Chris, for inviting me along today. It's been great sharing the 7 insights that we've found that really differentiate those that are doing well with data within their organisation and creating differentiation against their competitors in the market. And hopefully that's given everyone that's been listening today some food for thought about where they can go in this journey. Everyone's at a different place, and everyone will have made investments in different parts of this. And this is really looking at how you can bring all of that together within your organisation. I do encourage everyone to download the white paper and look at these 7 principles in more detail, because there's plenty more information in the white paper.
And if people want some information on how to get started, I guess you're a good person to talk to.
Yeah, we're helping people the whole time around this, and really the sort of 3 main things that I get people to look at is, first off, identify the value, create a use case and then a business case around this. It's all very well having a great technical idea, but if no one is going to be using it and no one's going to be creating advantage from it, then there's no point starting it. So start off from that real concrete evidence of where you're going to make competitive advantage. Then start designing the architecture to support that and build something quickly. As I mentioned earlier, start with a raw data set in Power BI and create the art of the possible so that people can see what the vision is. Then they'll buy into give you time to build out the process. And really start thinking about what is the data dividend, what is the value of the competitive advantage you'll create, because that will help you create a space and some funding to support you run these projects.
I like that phrase, data dividend. That's a good one. That's brilliant. Thank you, James. So we've got a little bit more time, not a huge amount more, for any questions that have come in. I think we do have one more, which I think we'll just have time to squeeze out before we've got to go. We've kind of covered this, but would you mind speaking to a specific use case for AI that you've seen?
Yeah, so we were working with a insurance company, and they were really interested in understanding, based on a claim, that was being disputed by another party, whether it was worth going to court or not. Because whenever you go to court, there's a significant amount of legal fees.
Absolutely,
there's court fees, there's time for the organisation themselves. And when you add all of that together, that's a considerable investment that needs to be made to decide whether it's worth fighting that case further. So their sort of business case that they came with was, if we could determine whether or not we should challenge with a legal claim or settle out of court, we could make much more informed decisions. So we worked with them to gather all of their claims data together and created some data engineering around that. So claims data comes in a whole myriad of different data formats, PDFs, TIFF files, other wild and wonderful scanned image format files. So we worked with them to land all of that into a data set, an unstructured data set. And then we used some text analysis tools over the top of that so that we could then pull all of that into something that was essentially queryable.
Right, yeah.
Once we got that together, we worked with some data scientists they have in their organisation that were working on the mathematical model behind this. And they were then able to work out, based on claims, based on court history, outcome history, whether or not a future claim coming in was going to be worth challenging or not. And they found that that was going to save them a significant amount of money on claims that they didn't need to take to court. They were better off settling out of court, and those that they were definitely going to win, they could invest more heavily in the legal process to protect their claim.
Cool, perfect use case, thank you. We have got a couple more questions, but unfortunately we're pretty much out of time. So if it's okay with those, I hope it is, we will try and answer those via email. For those of you who have any other questions that pop up either today or maybe in a week's time, or if you're watching the recording, then please feel free to contact us. So our contact information is on the screen for you now. Otherwise, one last word from me, and I just wanted to remind or introduce those to our last SQL in the City streamed event of the year. It's going to be taking place on Wednesday, the 12th of December. And the topic is all about the journey to compliant database DevOps. So we're going to have a lot of familiar faces, so Grant and Steve and Kathy and Kendra in the speaker lineup, joined by other members of the team at Redgate. And yeah, it's really designed just to help you broaden your skill set, support ongoing learning, and keep you up to date with what's new in the industry and from us at Redgate. So please don't miss out, register and enjoy. And James, thank you for your time. Thank you for those listening, and hopefully I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Cheers.